Welcome everyone to GCAP 2.0, hosted by Career Services. My name is Maya Hargens. I am a career counselor at Career Services, and I will be walking you through this presentation. Just as a reminder, GCAP stands for Gaucho Career Advising Program. We've been hosting this for a couple years now, and this is a new updated version. There's also a Google slideshow that can be included with this presentation. What we hope for folks to get out of this presentation are three things. The learning objectives include becoming more familiar with the Career Services website, our services, our resources, and how it can help you support your students. Maybe even more importantly is how to help you gain confidence in your conversations with students about major, career, grad school, and more, with resources and questions for you to ask. All of you are doing a great job. This is just to give you a little bit of a confidence boost that you have some information to back what you're saying to students. And we want to teach you how to refer a student to Career Services after they've met with you, learned all they can from you, and then they're ready to meet with us. This is the agenda if we were doing this in person, but the first video will include an overview of Career Services, a discovery of options, major, and career, and then exploring grad school. Our second video will be gaining experience, get hired, helping skills. In person, we will be doing a practice skill and then a wrap up. Career Services. Who are we? What do we do? Our mission is to educate and empower all students and recent graduates to prepare for and pursue success. Success means different things to different people. So we will talk about that, whether it means getting a job, whether it means going to grad school, or something in between. And when we say recent graduates, what we mean is students have access to Career Services for 1 year past the date they were last enrolled in classes. Not their graduation date, but the date they were last enrolled in classes. So they can continue to meet with career counselors, attend events, and participate with any services that Career Services has. Our vision is to inspire students to explore and gain knowledge of their occupational goals, to attain competencies and relevant experiences, to develop professional relationships, and to apply their education and unique attributes to address the needs and challenges of the world through their work. Basically, what this means to us is, UCSB does a great job of setting students up foundationally, educational-wise, and the great courses and a research institution. Our vision is to help with all the parts outside of that get them experience, professional skills, and have what they need for the time once they graduate. Our staff is made up of 4 different groups. The career education team is the group that you'll probably interact with the most, 6 career counselors and 10 career peers. We have an employer engagement team, an operations team, and then a few members of each of those teams make up our leadership team. We engage with students in a lot of ways. We send out emails, whether that's a weekly email with everything that we have going on, or a monthly email related to our career path areas, so education and human services, law and government, science and health, engineering and technology, and business and entrepreneurship. We also recognize that students use us outside of our normal business hours. So we have really great interactive web resources where students can have documents reviewed, practice their interviews. There are assessments they can take online without our help, and they're welcome to log into Handshake at any time. We do host a variety of career events where we bring employers and graduate schools together to meet with students for networking, for the attainment of jobs and internships, and also just to kind of learn about different fields out there. Students also can meet with us by attending a meeting with a career peer, whether that's virtual or in person. So career peers tend to be the person that students meet with first, and then the students can refer them to career path advising. Currently, that's mostly virtual, but that may change to also be in person as well. Our website is new as of a couple years ago, and it's wonderful. It has all of the resources that we're going to talk about today. and more. You can see that things are broken up by discover options, gain experience, get hired, and explore grad school. That's how we have also organized today's presentation. And you can see what the subheaders are under those. We're going to talk about those. But under discover options, talks about assessments, majors, and career. That's what we're focusing on right now. Gain experience, talks about how to get those experiences, internships, student jobs, research, extracurriculars, programming, etc. So you can see that anything a student needs is right here to get the foundational knowledge, and then we as career counselors or career peers are always available for students to meet with us once they have more complex questions. We also have our website broken down by career path areas and communities. So each career counselor is responsible for a career path area wherein we have done some specialized education in our field, whether it's business and entrepreneurship or any of these. And then we also have special connections and affiliations with our communities. We are allies, or we also represent that community area. And we have special information on each of these pages as they relate to career. So here we launch into Discover Options. This is a lot of information, so you're welcome to pause, take a look at the slideshow as we go through it. And here we go. The first step is to reflect on your own journey, because often we get maybe a little bit frustrated or a little bit kind of concerned that students are so focused on this, why are you having trouble picking a major? Well, think back to when you had to pick a major or when you changed your major and maybe how you felt about that. What influenced your major? Are you using that major now? Were you interested in using your major or not? So really reflect on the feelings that you had when you were a student. And I think keeping that in the back of your mind will provide a little bit of empathy for the students that we're meeting with, and to understand that this is maybe one of the bigger decisions that they've ever had to make, and often they're making it on their own, and they have not always been used to making decisions on their own. So here's our take. A student's major is a piece of the pie. Here's the pie. But it's not the majority, and there are a lot of other pieces that make up kind of this career development pie, if you will. What are the other pieces? The other pieces may be experience, skills, values, personality, life experience, family. Most statistics indicate that majors and careers are only loosely related. You can enter a wide array of industries and fields through a range of undergraduate majors. So when you kind of dispel the myth that, well, your major determines your career, and if you pick the wrong major, you'll be stuck in this career forever, it can help students kind of understand that this is just a piece of the puzzle. With a major, it teaches you a little about a lot of things, but you're not graduating as an expert in that field. An undergraduate major does not determine your career, but rather it helps you to develop a foundation of transferable skills that you can apply toward many careers. In most cases, the number of potential career options available through a major at UCSB is in the hundreds. Now, when you tell a student this, because they say, well, what can I do with my major in sociology or global studies or psychology and brain sciences or fill in the blank, and you say, you can do anything, that's often really overwhelming to them because they want some parameters, or they want someone to tell them what to do. So I also say, the good news is that you can do anything, but the bad news is that you can do anything. So instead of just leaving the conversation like that, we want to make sure that we share some resources with them so that they can start to see maybe a list and cross things off and add things to their own list. We'll show you those resources in a few minutes. Though major choice may align with career choice in specific instances, such as engineering, accounting, or going into academia, these instances do not inherently imply that the career outcomes are better. Rather, the career choices are clearer and more direct. You may have engineering students who go into engineering, or you may meet with an engineering student or an accounting student who does not want to go into those fields too, and that's okay. Um, they have developed a lot of transferable skills that make them a good fit for many other fields. The big question that comes up is, are two majors better than one? And what about minors? Two majors are not inherently better than one. Sometimes it can make sense for a student if they have two fields that are a little bit different or pretty different and they're really interested in both and they can't pick. The caveat to that, though, or the problem with that, is if a student is focusing so much on the majors and their academics and their grades and having so many papers and readings to do in classes, we don't want them to forget to do things outside of the classroom. So making sure that they have a balanced schedule and a balanced life to not only include getting experience, but making sure they have time for friends and family and rest and taking care of themselves versus really just pushing through to have two majors because they think that maybe someone will be impressed by that. Yes, someone may be impressed, but it's not going to make someone a better fit for a job necessarily, especially at the result of not having enough experience because they were so focused on academics. Minors can be a great option instead of two majors. So if a student has a major and then they're interested in a minor, that's great because it's less of a commitment. Some minors also encourage getting experience or internships in that field. So we do support majors, two majors, we do support minors, we support whatever a student wants to do. We just make sure that they are educated in what employers and graduate schools are looking at as a whole versus just focusing on the academics. Minors can be great also because they add to the major without taking away from the time. So you can see here this chart of interest, values, personality, strengths. There's probably other circles that go on here that we just don't know about or haven't focused on. And there's a very, very small section in the middle that is kind of that sweet spot. I'm not sure how many of us get there, but we hope that's kind of where we hope to get. Our career assessments assess for a variety of these things. So Focus 2 is an assessment that we offer, and it's on our website, and it's available to everyone at any time. It's self-guided and interactive. It has a values assessment within it, in addition to interests and personality and a few others. It is connected to majors, so if someone takes this assessment, it'll suggest majors related that are UCSB specific. It's great for first and second year students who just maybe don't know a lot about themselves yet because it's a little bit simplified, and it's available on our website. There's an access code in order to access it. But again, students can do this anytime without career services, and then they can make an appointment to talk about their results. Clifton Strengths for students is an assessment, and the rest of these that you'll hear from me about, a student does need to get access through a career peer or a career counselor. But Clifton focuses in positive psychology on the top 5 strengths that someone has to maximize what those top 5 strengths are versus focusing on maybe what's not working well. Let's focus on what's good and make it great. I utilize it a lot when I find that students are kind of having a little bit of a confidence issue or they kind of forget what they bring to the world. And I do that because it is not career related specifically, but it's more life related. So it talks about relationships and talks about academics and the workplace. It relates loosely to major and career. If when a student comes to us for an appointment to debrief about Clifton, we relate it to major and career, if that makes sense. It also gives strong language to use in interviews. So if a student has struggles talking about how great they are, which many of us do, this gives them language to focus on. that relates to the job that they are applying to really make those connections and kind of really help them sell themselves. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is a personality assessment. This allows folks to learn more about how they operate in the world. It provides strong information about how they make decisions. So if decision making is difficult, this can provide some insight into that. There's a section on this called what I need in a career to be satisfied based on the personality type. It often just confirms what people already know about themselves, but also just gives them permission to be who they are, and provides some strong insights about the positives and the benefits of being the type that you come up with, and then strategies to kind of counteract some of the negatives that may come up with your personality type. The strong interest inventory is very based on what your interests are. So do you like to do this? Do you like to do this? It's not connected to what your skills are, but what your interests are. And hopefully those are aligned, but not always. You can discover career titles based on interests. This is really helpful for students who often don't know, and people generally, not just students, people who don't know that many career titles. Often people know that there's teacher, lawyer, doctor, and a few things in between, but seeing real life job titles that may be a good match or themes that may be a good match because of how similar their interests are to others who are in those fields and satisfied can be a really helpful tool. So again, Clifton, Myers, and Strong are needed. A student is needed to come meet with a career counselor or a career peer in order to gain access. Focus 2 is something that students can access on their own. Here are some resources to share with students about majors. What can I do with this major? And I have it linked up here, so let's talk about that. Click on it. As it loads slowly, if you do not have access to Handshake as a student access, Career Services can give you access. You can just email careerhelp@sa.ucsb.edu and we can get you access. So student does need to log into Handshake to access this. It's a great resource. You can type in here, let's look at maybe communication. So a student comes to you who's studying communication and they say, I don't know what to do with this. You may log into what can I do with this major with them. Look up the major that you're interested in and walk them through this. Now, this is kind of saying, if you want to do something within communication because you really enjoy it, here are some things that people typically go into. They might go into business, and these are the areas that you can go into in business. These are the folks that hire those folks, and these are the strategies to help you be even more successful by going into this field. Look for companies that have an interest in hiring any major. There maybe consider a management trainee program. Develop computer skills like spreadsheets, database, and presentation software. So those are things that a student can do while they're still in school to make them a better fit for some of these roles. Students could go into public relations and advertising. These are the areas that they could go into in that field. These are the employers that typically hire. And then again, strategies to make that happen. Keeps going on and on. Nonprofit work, government. There's also a lot of overlap between a lot of these majors, as you can imagine. Higher education. Each of these pages also has something called general information, so it just kind of talks about what the communication degree provides. It's a broad degree. Skills and experiences gained through co-curricular activities, internships, part-time jobs are critical. So again, really pointing out that major is one piece of the puzzle, but then gaining background skills is really helpful. Building a network of contacts, get an experienced mentor, become a leader, develop public speaking skills, etc. And then provides a list of really helpful resources, professional associations that are related, Occupational outlook, we'll talk about that in just a minute. Here's the link up here. But if someone says, gosh, I'm really interested in becoming, going into advertising, they could click on this and it'll link up to a page here I'll show you. Kind of random related resources, and then employment opportunities. So there's lots of really great job boards out there, but these ones are even more specific to the field that are that may be really unique, that are harder to find, and I don't and these are going to be a little bit more vetted to the extent that they can be vetted. Another thing to share with students when they're asking about major and, what am I getting out of this? Or I'm not feeling confident in my major, or any questions like that, you can refer them also to what's called the program learning outcomes. So let's look at Black Studies on the general catalog, and this is called learning outcomes here. There's a PDF for each one. So each department has been responsible for creating a list of the program learning outcomes, or PLOs, of each undergraduate degree. So if a student is studying Black Studies and they say, this is great, I love my classes, but I don't even know what an employer, when they ask me about my major, what I'm going to say. Well, you can talk to them about your interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary knowledge skills, about how you understand race and gender, how you know how to do research, how you're really a strong writer, that you have strong critical thinking skills. This is something that employers are really looking for. Synthesizing arguments. These are all really strong transferable skills that any employer is going to really get excited about. Show tolerance of various point of views within and outside of academia. These are all really beautiful things to bring up in an interview, applying to grad school, or just for a student to feel really a little bit more confident about what it is that they're studying. Again, there is one of these for every major. They're not always as long as the Black Studies one. They even have them for the doctoral programs. But this, again, is helpful to kind of think big picture about what the major is providing to a student when they need language for that. We also share about online networking. So if a student has a question about a major and they say, I don't know what anyone who studied communication is doing. And I say, well, let's look on LinkedIn and see what those folks are doing. So you'll go to LinkedIn, you'll type in UC Santa Barbara across the top here. You'll go to alumni. And what we can do is look at a database. So if a student wants to live in a specific area, if they want to work at a specific, not sure why it's not loading there, or if it's misbehaving right now. Let's refresh it. Looks like we're out of luck. We'll go back to it. Along the same lines, there's a site called Gaucho Network, and this is a site that's operated by UCSB alumni. You can log in through your LinkedIn profile. It's free. It's accessible to staff as well as students, and it allows students to find gauchos who did a variety of things. And they're offering help. They're offering to support. So in LinkedIn, there's not always the guarantee that if you send emails to people or messages to people that they'll write back. These people are saying, hey, I'm here. I want to help you. So if a student wants to go into marketing and advertising, they might reach out to Andrea, who's an alum, who's willing to help, and who's in brand building. They'd studied business economics. and maybe French, but now they're in marketing and advertising. You can see their career path here, and you could message this person. There's a much likelier, much much more likely that they will message back on Gaucho Network than they may on LinkedIn. Let's see if LinkedIn is working again. May have to go back to it tomorrow. Gaucho Network obviously probably has a smaller list of people who know about it, but still a really useful tool. There's also groups that you can join. So if a student wants to go into Gauchos in Education, Gauchos in Law, or identifies with any of these communities, they can also join this way. So again, it's being around like-minded people. Students can also just find Gauchos and maybe utilize this here to see what their major was and whatnot. So they can look up field of study, they can look at people who studied art, and then reach out to those folks. So that's Gaucho Network. I'm not going to click on these for you right now, but UCSB as well as the UC system as a whole has a couple other pages with alumni outcomes and alumni at work and ways to just see what alumni have been up to. I just really think that that's a useful tool when meeting with students to not just speak about these things in big picture and theoretically and here's what people do, but here's actual faces of people and names and contact information, and share with them what those folks are doing, because it makes it more real. And I think it dispels the myth that they need to know what they're doing when they see people's career paths and see how kind of long and winding they often are. What are some resources to share with students about careers? Well, to be honest, it's the entire last slide. So they're very intertwined. There's a couple other resources that you can use. There's ONET online. That's what we're going to look at up here. So this is a lot of information to look at. I really highly recommend playing with it. But if you see a student who says, I want to find a job that has a really bright outlook, meaning people are getting hired in it, you can search by that. You can search by different areas, like if they're military, if they know their interest code, you can search by this. You can also type in something up here. And what ONET does, so let's type on dental assistant because that one has a bright outlook right now. It breaks it down as to what this person, what someone in this occupation does. So here's the definition of what they do, other job titles, and then breaks it down into all these summary things. So tasks, what do they actually do? Well, if you've been to the dentist, you probably know part of it, but we don't know all the ins and outs. And so you can also see like, okay, if you really like to prepare a patient, sterilize or disinfect instruments, you can also find similar occupations to that. What kind of technology does this person need to know? What kind of work activities? What kind of context? So if you say, I don't like to be on the phone, apparently 66% of dental assistants or dental hygienists are saying that they're on the phone every day. Job zone. What kind of education do you need? So most occupations in this zone require training in vocational schools, related on the job experience, or an associate's degree. So your typical college student may not be going into this field, but it's definitely an option for them. They may need to go to a community college and get some sort of certificate. So you can look up the certificates and where that's provided. What kind of skills are needed? Knowledge, education. So not many had a college degree. Here's an interest code. So this is related to this is the Holland code. If you could either take that in Focus 2, you could take that with the strong interest inventory, or ONET has their own interest profiler. So this helps someone get to know themselves a little bit. work styles, and then we learn about the wage. How much are people making doing this? Often we don't really know the reality of that. So let's look at California specifically. You can see on average, Californian dental assistants are making 47,000, although on average in the US they're making 38. And then there's more details even broken down by city or county, and how much they're making. And you can see people tend to max out at about 60,000. And you can even look for jobs, or you say that, that one's okay, but maybe I want to do something a little bit different, or I want to maybe be using my college education. Then we find related occupations, or just like on what can I do with this major, we find sources of additional information. So these would be really helpful extra resources to send a student. And here's the Occupational Outlook Handbook, where it lays it out a little bit differently. Here's a summary. Here's the growth. So we saw that it was a bright outlook. Average is about, I think, 5 to 8%. So this might tell us. The average growth rate for all occupations is 8%. So when it's at 11%, that means it's growing faster. They're expecting to add 36,900 dental assistants, for example, during 10-year period. And you can see what they do, work environment, how to become one. This one really lays it out cleanly here to tell you what's necessary, what kind of dental board and licensure is needed, pay, job outlook. So you can look this up for any occupation. So there's ONET, there's OOH, we just looked at that. Again, you can type in anything. And then when you look at occupation groups, you can look at different areas. So if a student wants to go into entertainment, you can see here, what kind of entry-level education is needed, and it can go from there. But often what we do is type it in. And then another way to look at careers or to understand how careers work is to look at job postings. A student may not be ready to apply to a job, but to look at a job with them can be really helpful. So if a student says that they want to become a teacher, and what kind of education should they have with that, we can look at teacher, we can find jobs. Maybe they want to be a preschool teacher. Here's the pay. Here are the qualifications. They need to be CPR and then Child Development Associate certification, and what kind of units they may need. If someone wants to become a teacher in the district, here's the pay. What kind of things that they do, knowledge, ability, and then what kind of licensures. And bachelor's degree preferred, maybe what kind of language. Someone may want to go into, let's say, data science, and they're not sure what degree to pick, or they think that they have to have a data science degree. Well, let's go here. We could also go to experience level. Let's click entry level. And I'm trying to find one that's local. It just says bachelor's degree. It doesn't necessarily even say data science. Looking for a machine learning associate, a day in the life, about the team. It doesn't necessarily say what degree they need, or degree in English, journalism, communication, linguistics, or equivalent practical experience. So they don't even need to have data science. Here's another one. Bachelor's degree in a technical field or equivalent practical experience. So someone has an internship and a bachelor's degree from UCSB, I would encourage them to still apply. So seeing real life job postings in Indeed, in LinkedIn, on Handshake can really help shape how a student considers a job when they see it in real life versus kind of thinking about it only in their head or relying on what other people know. So how to research careers beyond the keyboard. Students are often kind of doing a lot of Googling and spending time on job boards and LinkedIn and whatnot, but sometimes meeting with people who are in those fields is really important. So an informational interview is a low commitment way to get some practical knowledge about an occupation without applying for a position necessarily. Or if a student has a couple options that they're interested in for their career path, but they don't know where to start, doing an informational interview may be a good place to start so that they maybe cross something off their list. Informational interview is when they meet with a professional and ask about their experience doing that type of work, and ask for any advice. They are not necessarily asking for a job or an internship, but this informational interview could lead into a shadowing opportunity. So maybe a 30-minute to 1 hour informational interview over coffee or over Zoom. If that position sounds exciting to a student, they can say, gosh, this is really, I really enjoyed getting to know you and getting to know your profession. I wondered if you'd ever be able to allow me to shadow you and just kind of observe you doing your typical day in your career. Not only will the person hopefully be flattered, but they say yes to, it's unpaid, of course, a couple hours, maybe a day, maybe a week. It's whatever the two of you decide. Now, of course, this is more important. This is a vital part of going into a health profession and is often expected to do shadowing, but shadowing can happen in any type of field, not just healthcare. So it's one of the best ways to preview a potential career option in a short period of time without that commitment level. Once a student's done an informational interview and they've shadowed, maybe they're going to narrow that list down even further, and then they'll be able to take it to the next step to find some sort of opportunity. And we'll talk about that on the next video. So while we're exploring things and we're discovering options and we're learning about kind of fields, grad school really begs to be here. And one of the first things that we do with a student is really try to work with them to learn about what their motivations are for grad school and help them learn what their motivations are. A lot of times their motivations are great, but sometimes they're based in misconceptions. So here's just some overview. One motivation to go to grad school is that you need to go. You have to go for your specific career goal. So you have to go to grad school to become a lawyer. You have to go to a professional school. You have to go to grad school to become a career counselor or to go in the medical field. And so there's just some very obvious answers to this. Maybe you want to be a teacher. You can't get into this field and be successful without having grad school. Now, that's not all. You can often do a more entry-level role or a supportive role to see if that's a field that you really want to go into, because grad school is time-consuming and expensive. So you want to make sure your specific career goal is something that a student's really kind of figured out. Another motivation is that grad school is frequently pursued for your specific career goal. There are several instances in which grad school is not required to pursue a career path, but most of the professionals that work within the field have obtained a specific graduate degree to be a well-prepared and competitive candidate. So if you want to work at a museum as a director, you'll find that most of those folks have a master's or a doctorate in museum studies. Now, I interviewed a person who's in the State Department who has a law degree. Does that mean that you need a law degree to be in the State Department? No, that just means that they started as a lawyer and then went to State Department. So really helpful for students to interview or to do informational interviews or look on LinkedIn as kind of a behind the scenes informational interview to see who has what degree, and then even ask the people about it. Did you need that? Was it helpful to have that, or did it set you back time wise and money wise? The students are often asking about MBAs. MBAs are not a requirement for a lot of careers because you often learn on your own, but does it allow a person to move quicker or make more money or become more competitive candidate? Maybe, but it's just not always a guarantee. So it's important to do homework to see if it is a guarantee. Another motivation is grad school helps you change or refocus your career direction. It can be a good investment for changing career direction or gaining momentum towards a specific career path. So if you have been in the graphic design field and then you decide that you want to go into finance, you may need to get a master's to develop those skills to prove that to prove and to just understand what you're doing to go into that field. I met with a student who graduated with a degree in engineering and then wanted to go into museum studies. They were considering maybe getting a master's in museum studies because they just didn't have the baseline knowledge that maybe someone who'd studied museum studies would have. There are also folks who are career changers who want to go to med school, and so maybe they need to do a post-baccalaureate program for career changers to get into med school. It's a little bit of a different conversation, but very similar that you'll have to refocus your career direction. Some people like grad school because they just like to learn and they want to keep knowing more information. This may be more specific than a general love for learning, as learning through formal schooling is one of the many ways. Sometimes I encourage students to think about how much they might learn on their first job. And that is that kind of, would that learning fill that cup for them? Or could they learn through community college classes in the evenings? Or do they love learning, or are they really kind of just comfortable with that school mentality because that's where they've been for a long time? So really asking the tough questions, supporting students where they're at, and encouraging them to kind of answer some of these questions for themselves. Here's a few more. Another motivation, graduate school provides other incentives. So sometimes people go to grad school because, and these are case-by-case examples, they're an international student who isn't ready to go back to their home country, and grad school will extend their time in the United States or allow them to switch into a field that's STEM related and allow them to do OPT and have more time. Maybe military students have money to spend from their educational benefits, or undocumented students may need to get some sort of licensure or certificate or program so that they can work for themselves if they do not have the status to be an employee in the US. So there are lots of reasons. Some less than ideal motivations. You'll hear a lot of us career services might have experienced this, not knowing what else to do. It's not a great backup plan, and it's not a great first plan for saying, I don't know what I want to do. And students don't realize that grad school is very, not that undergrad is easy at all, but it gets even harder and it's even more specific. And so you really want to have a field that you just love so much that you can't stop learning about it. And often if you aren't sure what you want to do, you're not sure what field you want to study. So really encouraging students to kind of take the time to hear themselves, understand themselves. There's a lot of peer pressure to go because everyone else is going. Maybe they're going because they don't know what else to do. And so it just becomes this kind of endless loop. I mentioned this just a few minutes ago, but there's the continuation of identity of being a student and that school is comfortable. Delay of the job search, not ready for the real world, or can't find a job. I mean, during tough times like recessions and pandemics, more people go to grad school because it's comfortable and they don't have to worry about getting laid off or making ends meet in that way. A lot of times people think it will make them more competitive, and that's not always the case. Yes, often it is the case, but you have to also think about the return on investment and the time, the brain power, the money, maybe the lack of travel, maybe putting off family or friendships because you're a student. Some people just want to have a higher degree because they really like that kind of achievement or the prestige that comes with that. And there's family pressures that, undergrad or getting a college degree, a bachelor's degree is just the first step. And so you need to keep going. And families don't always understand that, it's harder to get money for master's programs, or it doesn't always make someone more competitive. And so while you're paying off loans, you could have been working for 2 or 3 years. So this is a lot of what we meet with students about in appointments, is to kind of dispel myths and misconceptions and understand their motivations. How can advisors support students deciding on grad school? Ask them about their motivations. Look at job postings together to see what the education requirements are. If you're seeing time and time again, it's saying bachelor's degree, bachelor's degree, bachelor's degree, and you're like, look, grad school's not going anywhere. Maybe try on this job first and see if you like it, and then you can move forward into getting a higher level degree if necessary, or maybe your company will help you pay for it. Encourage them to talk to faculty. Faculty went to graduate school, they got their doctorates. TAs are in graduate school. Now, encouraging students to talk to faculty is kind of a loaded thought. We often say, yeah, just go talk to your professor. Well, it's not always that easy for students. There's an intimidation factor often. So I really would advise anyone who's advising students to really also just say, hey, have you talked to your faculty very much? What's your comfort level with that? Do you want to practice maybe what you'll say, or do you want to write an email together to them? Really kind of bringing it down to reality that this may be a tough conversation for them to have, and that's why they haven't had it yet. Looking on LinkedIn at alumni, let's see if LinkedIn is operating yet. Try one more time. There we go. Not sure it's working perfectly. No, we'll have to go back to it later. Dispel myths about grad school. It doesn't always make you more competitive. It won't always pay off with a higher salary, but it'll definitely give you some debt to pay. You can't change your course of study in graduate school. I don't think students really even realize that. Taking time off to decide won't be seen as negative. Gap year, gap years, gap decades are often vital to making sure that graduate school is the right decision for someone. So, and then often students will say, well, if I don't go now, maybe I'll never go. Well, if you're never going to go, then maybe that was the whole point, is that it's not necessary. Because if you're going to go, you're going to go. Just because someone pursued grad school doesn't mean it is needed. And how can you support with their application? So advisors can help support students with their grad school application by reminding them that they are going to need letters of recommendation. Often those come from faculty and TAs. So those letters will not be written, or at least not be written strong and well, if a student has not made a close connection with faculty members. So giving them some suggestions, some feedback, some thoughts, some strategies about how to talk to faculty to start to develop that relationship. Encouraging them to maintain a strong GPA and a balanced course load. You may work with them, if this is within your wheelhouse, to look at some of the programs they are looking at and seeing what the different prerequisite classes are, to see if the UCSB classes fulfill those. Encouraging them to get experience. So, grad school and professional schools, yes, want strong GPAs, want, students who are very motivated, but they also want people who are leaders and who've done research potentially, and who've been part of student orgs and who have had jobs and internships in the field. So really kind of encouraging a student to look into that, referring them to career services to help with that, talking to the admissions people. The admissions reps for the schools are gold mines for information, and so it would be helpful for a student, especially early on, to reach out to the admissions reps for questions that they can't find the answer to online, or to say, what kind of experience are you looking for? What kind of GPA are you looking for? I mean, a lot of this stuff should be on their website, but if there's something missing, we don't, career services and nor advisors, we can't know the ins and outs of every graduate program, but the people who work in those graduate programs do, and they want people to reach out to them because they want great applicants. So offering other support can be referring them to the admissions rep, and even telling them that there are people like that exist, because often when I mention that to students, they say, oh, there's someone there that does that. And also providing students referrals to career services, pre-professional advising through Letters in Science, CLAS, EOP, other programs that, other groups on campus that can help them get connected and get support. Okay, our next topic is gain experience and get hired. Again, these are the way that we also have them listed on our website as two separate ideas, but there's a lot of overlap between the two. So gaining experience. How do experiences outside the classroom help students? Sometimes we do need to convince them that getting the degree is not enough, that getting hands-on experience is really important. So these are some ideas to share. Having experiences outside the classroom can increase competition for employment in grad school. I let students know that if there are two identical students who have the same major, the same GPA, and one has experience and one doesn't, the person with experience is more likely to get it, of course. And even if someone has a lower GPA and more experience compared to someone who has a higher GPA and no experience, the person with the experience is going to get it, because not only will they maybe have better references, they may be more professional, they'll have better interview skills, they'll be maybe more mature, they'll have more hands-on experience, they'll have more to talk about in an interview and on a resume. So it really can make someone more competitive. Confidence and professionalism can come from going to a work environment. And I mean any kind of experience. This could be volunteer, this could be retail or food service, this could be a professional internship. But when someone is required to show up on time somewhere and perform a duty for a supervisor, that can often lead to higher levels of professionalism. And we are hearing from employers that not all students are coming to them after graduation with strong levels of professionalism. So we really want to encourage that. Getting experience can help clarify career interests. So often students will get an internship somewhere or start a position somewhere or do a shadowing experience and then say, gosh, that was nothing like I thought it would be. Or, wow, I loved that so much. I'm going to keep going down that path. So often students are trying to figure out what they want to do as a career first, and then try to gain experience to support that. But that it doesn't always work that way. I mean, that's a nice thought, but if sometimes you need to try something on first, then make the decision. It's not the most efficient way, but it's the best way. Getting experience allows for hands-on application of their theoretical knowledge. So UC Santa Barbara is a highly theoretical research institution, and there's not a lot of room for practicing what one learns in the classroom. There are occupational specific and transferable skills that one can develop by having an experience that they just won't get in the classroom. And that could be teamwork, that could be the ability to follow directions well. That may be presentation skills, customer service skills, multitasking. A lot of these things they'll do in the classroom, but there's really strong ways that they can describe it in an interview if they're doing these things in a job. So we do often need to kind of convince a student that a position that they had really does have strong transferable skills. Let's say they were a camp counselor somewhere for young kids and they say, well, gosh, I was just a camp counselor. I was just managing 8-year-olds, for example. And when we delve a little bit deeper and say, well, what are some of the skills that you needed to do that? We come up with skill levels of patience and multitasking and problem solving and thinking quickly on their feet and working with a diverse population. So students can really benefit from meeting with advisors and career services to kind of see their experiences through the lens of someone else. And maybe most importantly, getting experience expands their professional network. These are people who get to know them on a professional level and may be able to look out for them when they're ready to graduate and say, hey, we're ready to hire you on, or hey, we heard about this position that you might be interested in. They may be people that can introduce them to others or write be a reference or write a letter of recommendation. So I can't put enough emphasis on the fact that a professional network being expanded is a really important part of gaining experience. Lots of type of experience. Often the key word is internship. When students meet with us or meet with you, they want to get that coveted internship. But I try to play down the word internship sometimes because it's not always the best way to get experience for some students, especially first and second years who may not find an internship, or students who are not quite competitive enough to get an internship. You can get a kind of bad internship and a great volunteer opportunity. So an internship does not necessarily mean that it's a better experience. There's lots of different types. There will be positions, full-time positions or graduate programs who will want to see the word internship on a resume, but not many. Volunteer opportunities, research, part-time jobs and student jobs, studying abroad is a wonderful experience for students, personal projects that they might do over the summer or on weekends, campus orgs, especially if they have any kind of leadership role. Athletics is an often forgotten type of experience, but when we meet with students, we can really help them leverage their athletic experience on their resume or in an interview. Certificate programs that they might get online through LinkedIn or through a program like PACE on campus. And then shadowing too can be a type of experience that either shows up on a resume in some cases or in a cover letter or in an interview, and I think like we mentioned before is a necessity for people going into the health professions. Here's some ways that career services connect students with opportunities. So we host career fairs and networking events. And when I have a link here, it'll take you to our page on the website that gives you more detail. So we host a lot of events that connect students with employers. And I try to remind students who are nervous about doing this, as I once was and currently am, uh, that these are really unique. And these are hard to come by in the quote unquote real world when you've graduated. So it's really important to take advantage of career fairs and networking events. We host at least one large career fair each academic quarter, not including the summer, but often many more than that with smaller networking events that are a little bit more niche or related to a specific area. And this is a chance for students to be seen beyond their resume. Not every student has a stellar resume, but they do have a stellar story to tell. And so getting in front of an employer and sharing that story and getting the employer to get to know them beyond the digital resume that may not even be seen by them, may only be seen by robots, is a really important part of attending a networking event. We work closely with students, if they let us, to learn how to talk to employers at these events and how to share their story and really try to give them the confidence that they need to put themselves in front of someone like that and share what they have. This is often really useful for, let's say, international students who may struggle with finding positions related to their major. This may work really well for students who have a major that's different than the role that they're applying to. So maybe a student is interested in going into software, working in software, and they don't have an engineering degree. They can go in front of an employer and talk about the personal projects they've done, the programs that they taught themselves, and that can be really a remarkable place for an employer to say, yeah, why don't you apply and make sure that you include my name, and it can make all the difference. We connect students with employee opportunities through digital communication. So not only do we have a weekly digest of our general events that we mentioned to you before, this week at Career, and the monthly highlight of career path events and opportunities, but we also have promoted emails from employers who really are eager to hire our UCSB students. So they pay a fee, and that we send out an email to students who meet the criteria, and that's an opportunity for students to get connected. Employers also host info sessions with us, and this is a scheduled time where recruiters chat about their organization, what they have available, answer questions, talk about what they're looking for. They're basically selling themselves and their company to our students because, again, they are eager to hire our students. Students maybe are nervous about attending these, so again, we talk about what it's like to be there, what kind of questions to ask, how to dress, what to bring. But again, another time and place for students to get in front of employers, kind of beyond just submitting a resume to the abyss. And then Handshake. All events are posted in Handshake, so we encourage students to spend time in there. When we have a career fair, of course, we post all the recruiters that will be at the career fair, what they're looking for, and more information about them so that a student can do their research and homework before they attend a career fair. And then many local and beyond job and internship opportunities are listed in Handshake. I don't recall if I mentioned this, but all work study positions are posted in Handshake, and most on-campus opportunities are posted in Handshake. So here's Handshake. I'll just show it to you quickly. Oh, that's not what you want to see. So here's Handshake. You can look at jobs or you can look at events. So let's look at jobs first. And utilizing the filter options is really helpful. Again, kind of your typical job board. What's interesting also is that they post, folks who've worked at this organization that also have Handshake at their university. So you can ask them about their experience. So really great opportunities here. And then events. It's summer, so we don't have a lot going on, but you can see when the next the Grad Professional Schools Fair is, some workshops that we have over the summer, what career fair we have going on, and registration's not quite open yet, but A student could mark their calendar and then keep an eye out to see which employers are coming. We also have a system that we use in our office called Document Review. And this is a resource to help students gain experience to get hired because VMOC is part of Document Review. Here's Document Review. This is our system, at least our first level system of reviewing resumes, CVs, and cover letters. So a student to have a resume reviewed goes into VMOC with their net ID. If they have a cover letter, they submit it via Google with their UCSB email. And either one of these can also have the cover letter allows a peer or a counselor to review the cover letter virtually and provide feedback. And then once that's happened, a student can then make an appointment with a peer or a counselor to talk more in detail. And if a student has a resume, they can go into VMOC. VMOC will provide some suggestions based on machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then there's also the opportunity in VMOC for a student to receive feedback and then improve it and then get advising. So this is kind of our process here. Big Interview is a really great resource that we utilize, especially we utilize it before a student meets with us for a mock interview. So here's Big Interview. This is a service that we pay for, and it has so many great videos that one can use to practice. Students can go to the assignments tab and record themselves answering a couple questions and then send it to Career Services, and then we can provide them feedback. There's even an AI tool that will allow the computer to analyze a student's answers to questions and check on their eye contact and filler words. Database of questions, and I like this because it's organized by different industry as well. So a student, if they're going into accounting, they can look up what kind of accounting questions there might be and start to practice those. And then once they've gone through this process, then they can meet with us in person. We also host a series of workshops and panels that we either do over Zoom or we will eventually start to do in person, and then we've recorded a lot of them. So here's our YouTube. Here was our YouTube channel. And we've recorded all of our workshops. And then we also have channels related to different industry areas. So this is actually something that I hosted, Careers in U.S. Department of State. So we can look at playlists and we can look at law and government, for example, or communication and arts. And these are ones that my colleagues have hosted of different specific areas to support students. So we've covered this a little bit, but where do you find experiences in jobs? In Handshake. Okay, I already mentioned this, but all work-study positions are in Handshake. Those usually get posted in mid-August with the intent of starting for the fall quarter once work-study starts. Most campus positions and then local, statewide, national positions are in Handshake. I encourage students to use Handshake, but I also encourage them to use other resources when they're looking for jobs, especially full-time post-graduation jobs. Handshake is really good, but I would always encourage someone to use more than one resource. LinkedIn is a great job board because you can search by experience level, you can look at more companies, more details about the company, you can see how many alumni work in that company. You can often see who posted it and reach out to them if you need to. And they also have an easy apply button that I think can be really helpful if used correctly, if the LinkedIn profile is really strong and the LinkedIn profile really tells the story of a person matching the job that they're applying to. If it's kind of a little bit of an off position for what they seem to be typically qualified for with their LinkedIn profile, it may not be the best option, and they should apply the traditional way of going to the company's website. Indeed is another popular one. It's easy to use. It also has an option to filter by experience level, which I appreciate for students. And then other great listing boards. Idealist.org is useful for nonprofits and volunteer opportunities. USA Jobs is federal government. Volunteer Match allows for, of course, volunteers. What can I do with this major specialty boards? We already saw when it was related to communication. So that's another place to look. And then going global, we haven't talked about yet. That's also accessible through Handshake, has job boards for students or people who are looking to work abroad. Common myths and misconceptions about the job search process. And many advisors ask questions about this, so I wanted to make sure that we highlighted these things. And the question was, does GPA matter when it comes to getting hired? Typically, no. I don't think anyone's asked for my GPA in the 15 years that I've been employed outside of college and grad school. In many and most industries, GPA does not matter to get a job or an internship. There will be exceptions, um, and the exceptions may be some engineering, accounting, maybe finance roles. There will be, for instance, in Handshake, some employers are looking for someone to have a 3.5 GPA, and a student's GPA is listed in Handshake. This is again why going to a career fair or an info session can be helpful for a student who doesn't meet all the criteria. Having someone specify for 3.5 though, I don't know, I don't see that very often. Maybe 3.0 is if they are specifying. So it's often kind of on the lower end, and students are often a little bit more worried about their GPA than they need to be. So they might say, gosh, my GPA is so low. And then we say, well, what is it? And they say, well, it's a 3.2. And the employer's looking for 3.0 or higher. So they have nothing to worry about. But if a student does have a lower GPA and they're worried about it, sending them to a career counselor, we can really help them kind of reframe their experiences and talk about, what they do have to offer versus what they don't have to offer. Here's the old conundrum of I can't get experience because I don't have experience. So often people are looking at job descriptions and it says that you must have, it's an entry level position and it says that you must have experience in order to apply. Students and people generally often have more experience than they think, especially related when you consider their coursework and their time in college, um, part-time jobs, volunteering. Once you start to talk to a student and they say, well, I don't, after they've said, I don't have any experience, and you talk about maybe their university experience, we often find some gems that they hadn't thought about. Now, sometimes we don't, and that makes it harder. Um, but students also think that experiences that count must have been paid, and that doesn't have, there's no truth behind that. So this conversation is often a confidence and myth busting conversation. Um, and it's to say that students should start building experience early. So students can come to career services really early on so that we can encourage them. We encourage you to encourage them to get experience. Another thing that comes out of this too, though, is when looking at jobs with students, especially with people who identify as women and people who identify as people of color, these communities and these populations are less likely to apply to a job where they don't meet every line of the criteria. Whereas research has shown that people who identify as men, if they identify with just a few lines of the requirement, they're going to apply. So we really try to encourage students, when they say, must have 2 to 3 years of experience of blank. If they have 1 year or a few months even, but they really have the strong potential, we encourage them to apply anyway. If a student can do 75% of the work or has the potential to do 75% of the work, we really encourage them to apply. So that's again where this becomes a confidence building conversation. When should I apply for a job comes up a lot. Most students find jobs just like you and I do shortly before we need them. Now, career fairs kind of change the environment of this, where in accounting and engineering, students often find positions really early on in the school year, and that maybe changes how other students feel like what their timeline should be. So when we meet with students and they say, well, everyone I know has a job already, and it's January, for example, and they're not graduating until June, I say, well, are they accounting or engineering students? And they say, yeah. Well, that's because that's just how it works when a company tends to be hiring a big cohort of students. It doesn't always have to be accounting and engineering, but those are pretty popular ones. So we try to kind of help with the misconception that everyone needs to have a job so far in advance. And often the students that are having struggles don't even know what they want to do yet. So they're not ready to sign the dotted line anyway. The common timing is to find a job, look for a job, I would say March, April, May, with the intent of starting right after graduation. If they're applying in January or February and they have a June graduation date on their resume, the employer's going to say, we need someone to start yesterday. You're not ready yet. So we really try to explain that to students. And another thing that came up is that, often the people who have jobs are the ones that talk about it. And the people who don't. So it's a very skewed view of who has jobs and who doesn't. How can I be competitive with a liberal arts degree often comes up. I don't have a STEM degree, and that seems like what every employer is looking for. And you can be very competitive with a liberal arts degree. There's such a depth and breadth of transferable skills, like we looked at with the program learning outcomes. So those would be this would be a good time. This would be a good time to share those again with the student so that they're reminded about how great they are, and reminding them too about the experience that they've gotten, their connections and their networking. They might have really strong interview skills. We want to build their confidence up a little bit. And yes, there are a lot of STEM companies and a lot of STEM companies that come to career fairs. Those companies also need people who are not engineers and scientists. So really kind of expanding a student's horizons and knowledge about what is out there. We will often look at the list of employers coming to the career fair and kind of help them identify some companies that may be good for them. So there's plenty of competitiveness with a liberal arts degree, and a student needs to be feeling confident enough to sell that to an employer. Here's some ways to support students. So in addition to providing resources like we've talked about today, you can ask great questions. So open-ended questions are a great way for a student to open up. When a student comes in and is feeling stressed about major or career, there are often deeper concerns rooted in that question or concern that they have. And so it can be helpful to ask really smart, helpful questions for them. Be an active listener. Often we get so caught up in what we think the answer is that we forget to hear what's being asked. So if a student maybe comes in and says, I just switched into this major and I don't feel good about my job prospects and I just don't even know what I would do and my parents are stressing me out, I wouldn't just go straight to, well, what's that major? Let's talk about it. But maybe, ask more questions. So how are you feeling about this major switch? Or, gosh, that's really hard to feel like you've had to switch and then people are questioning it. So really listening, asking questions, reflecting, and showing empathy. Empathy doesn't always come naturally to people. To share empathic statements, you might be thinking it, but here's some just practice ones. I can see how hard you tried here. I know what it feels like to get a bad grade. I'm sorry this is so discouraging right now. It has to be difficult to deal with this. It's perfectly normal to feel frustrated in a situation like this. So, you know, Pick up what feels most natural for you to say. And when you're providing resources and you're seeing that maybe things are a little bit deeper beyond what an academic advisor can kind of take on or has the time for, you can refer to career services, you can refer to CAPS, OISS. So just for new people who don't know what these things are, maybe career services is, of course, us. CAPS is counseling and psychological services. OISS is Office of International Students and Scholars. EOP is Education Opportunity Program. CLAS is Campus Learning Assistance Services. DSP is Disabled Students Program. Financial Aid, Resource Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity. I don't remember what CARE stands for. Women's Center and more. So really encouraging students to seek outside resources. Sometimes they come to academic advising, sometimes they come to career services because these seem like safe places to land with empathic supporters like you and I. And sometimes students then need a referral to a campus resource that can support them more in what they need. Just a reminder about active listening. Some key listening skills is, paying attention, really just listening, even having a little bit of silence on your end as you wait, not cutting them off, and paying attention to body language. Withholding judgment, just letting them speak and not jumping to anything, and no arguing, and no, oh, well, that's a misconception, or that, gosh, I don't know why you think that. Really just listening, reflecting. So it sounds like you're saying, or what I'm hearing from you, or you've changed your major into sociology from biology, and it's just feeling like a lot. You can also ask questions to clarify, and I think this can be something that people feel uncomfortable doing and maybe can be shy about, but it's okay to clarify something, and the student or whoever you're doing active listening with will correct you if they need to. So, maybe clarifying, wait, so I didn't, can you clarify when you changed your major, or can you further tell me about how you're feeling about that, or what do you think about blank? Kind of really doing those open-ended questions. And when a student feels you listening to them and hearing them and asking questions and being engaged, they'll probably open up a little bit more than they would have otherwise. And then you can summarize. So just let me just check in with you to make sure I have this all correct. Last fall, you had a rough time with some health issues, and biology was really piling up on you, and you just decided at that time that it maybe wasn't a good fit. And now we are here in winter quarter. You've thought about switching into sociology, and you're experiencing some pressures from your family about what that might look like for you in your future. And so now you're here to kind of work together to see about what kind of research opportunities there are on campus, and where to go from here. And then you can share with some, share your feedback. So I hear that some of the concerns are, how to get research in sociology to help you feel more connected. Here's a resource that I'd love to share with you. But again, really trying to build that rapport, trust, and empathy between you and your advisee. I know that time doesn't always allow for a lot of this, but it really can change your relationship with a student. We put together some great questions to ask a student, and this is linked to this Google Doc right here. But pick and choose what works best for you, what feels most aligned with your personality, to kind of help keep the conversation going. And This is just a nice little cheat sheet to have if you are kind of feeling like you're struggling with where to go next with students or how to support them with great open-ended questions. I'm not going to do this here, but we did a little fishbowl of how to help a student, and you can see I use this example a few times. I guess I can describe too. So we had a spring second year student come in having switched from biology to sociology. In meeting with the student, they were pretty discouraged that their family wasn't supportive and that they didn't know what to do with sociology. And so it ended up just we using some empathic statements to make sure that they felt heard. Um, and what kind of came up was, how can I best help you from here? This is our first appointment. I'm happy to meet with you a few more times. What would you like to accomplish today? You do not need to solve, and nor should you feel the pressure to solve because that's not your job. You don't. They don't need to solve everything in a 20, 30-minute appointment. You are there to support the student and help them come up with answers and help them come up with solutions and strategies. So really helping them decide or letting them tell you, well, I think the most important thing that I'd like to figure out today is, what are my classes going to look like for fall? And how do I figure out what I want to do with sociology? Those are probably two very big things to do. But at least you have a plan to get through, the next 15 minutes of your appointment, for example. And then you can say, okay, well, next time we talk, what do you want to talk about? Or think about ahead of time what you want to talk about and accomplish next time. You can put the onus on the student to help you help them. I'm going to pass through this one. We're just wrapping up here. How does career services help students? So we've talked a lot about digital resources, but when can they talk to us? Students can meet with career peers, which we have 10 amazing, very fully trained, vetted career peers. They can meet with them virtually and in person any step of the way during their career development and discovery journey. Peers help students with many of the general questions we get and then refer students to all of our resources events and then to career counselors. Career counselors work with students with more complex concerns and focused on the nuances of specific industries. So when students are feeling parental or family pressures, when students are having mental health concerns, when students are specifically asking very in-depth questions about law school or becoming a teacher, for example, the peers will answer some of those and show them our online resources because we do have a lot online. And then once the student kind of gets the baseline foundational knowledge, if they still have more questions, they are welcome to make an appointment with a career counselor. And for you all to refer to career services. So if you have a student who wants to meet with a career peer for the basics, refer them to the peers. They can make a drop-in appointment through QList. That's same day, same hour, typically between 9 and 4 during the academic year and 10 and 4 during the summer. Or they can request an appointment through Handshake for the next day or anytime after the next day. If you have someone who has a more advanced career anxiety or complex situation, you can email us with some information and we can direct you to the appropriate career path counselor. So email address is checked multiple times a day, and we will be able to change permissions within Handshake to allow for a student to quickly make an appointment with a career counselor, usually within, I don't know, 1 to 3 days. We don't have that much of a backlog. And this is something for you to think about. What are some ways for career and advising to connect? Just as we kind of support each other through this process of helping students, we want to be your ambassadors and we want you to be our ambassadors. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate you listening and watching this video. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, you're welcome to email that email address that we just provided, careerhelp@sa.ucsb.edu, or you can email me, Maya Hargens, maya.hargens@sa.ucsb.edu. We hope this was helpful in your support of students and just to give you a little bit more confidence and some resources to use. Thank you.